Hey, Bobby, I just wanted to get your perspective on this because, you've dealt with addiction and all that. But, when I was a kid, I was abused, and it led to an addiction. And I'm in my 30s now, and it was in my mid 20s that I realized, everything that kind of added up kind of led to my addiction. So, letting everything out to my girlfriend, she wants me to go to the Celebrate Recovery,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm not. I went to one of the sessions, but I'm not too comfortable with that.
Mm-hmm.
I want to see your perspective. If maybe like one on one with just a therapist is probably where I need to be, because the way I see it is the stuff that happened to me as a kid, led me to be destructive in my life versus hanging around the wrong people. It was just something that I didn't have a say so on what was done to me. So I don't know. I don't see myself in the Celebrate Recovery or AA kind of thing.
Right.
Um, so I don't know. I'm just kind of lost the whole thing.
Well, I appreciate you reaching out, Jack, and I'm sorry for your struggle. It's never easy to deal with addiction. It really can overwhelm our life. I would say, as it relates to what your pathway toward recovery is, um, sure, counseling can be a great approach. I've used counselors many times in my life, even as a pastor. I think I would rather go and spend a couple days with a professional counselor that's Christian uh, than I would rather go to a conference for 2 days, because a counselor has this ability to get underneath the hood and to really talk with you about things. And I think that we can all use some good counsel. And I think getting rid of the negative stereotype over counseling is a good thing, because we all have blind spots, and a counselor can kind of get in and help you understand what's going on. And you want to get at some of the root stuff of what happened when you were younger. Have you been able to forgive? How has it affected your life? What have been the consequences of not dealing with it? Do you feel like you're fully healed and prepared? At the same token, when God comes along and does bring that healing into your life, you want to be a voice to be able to help others. So, for example, had I just kind of chosen the non-community route and went silent, you might not have known to pick the phone up to call, because there's this guy named Bobby on the other line that's been through recovery. And so I would say sometimes people want to get healed and they don't want to talk about it. They don't want to think about it. But it's not that easy. We owe it to people who still suffer, who still hurt, to share our story. And we might not need to do that right away, but we need to realize that that's part of recovery and healing too. Our willingness to give our story away, our willingness to share. It's not fun for me to talk about being a recovering alcoholic who, after 23 years of going without a sip of alcohol, had a relapse as a pastor of a large church and had to stand up and share that journey.
Yeah.
Why am I sharing that? That'd be a lot easier to keep in the closet, because I want you calling, Jack. And I want other people out there. And so that's the 12th step of AA. That's the final step in Celebrate Recovery. We give it away. And so any recovery that is not about ultimately giving it away is a recovery that's waiting for another relapse. And so I would say, if you need to start with some individual stuff, wonderful. That's great. And if you don't feel comfortable going to Celebrate Recovery, explore those questions, but maybe down the road, figure out how you can still give your story away, because guaranteed, God doesn't clean us up in this world when people are still dirty and hurting and need help. So that's what I would suggest.
Now, that doesn't mean, Bobby, that you're saying that God allowed that to happen, that God was okay with the abuse that Jack went through so that Jack would be able to help people years later?
No, not a, well, I mean, again, and there's different things like Jack. If I would say, it sounds like an addiction that came as a result of some abuse in the past. And you got two different stories here. When it comes to some of the abuse stuff, that can be a little bit more of a sensitive issue for people to even talk about. So you might need to think about, well, where's a comfortable place where I could help people? So
Yeah.
it could be as simple as, man, somebody comes along and you hear that they've been hurting, and you can relate and you share your story. As it relates to addiction, that's a little bit easier to talk about than sexual abuse. I just think whatever it is through prayer, Jack, that you feel that God would use you to help others in, go for it. If it's not Celebrate Recovery, if it's not AA, just keep your eyes open to help people, because help's coming your way.
Think about that for a second. I mean, why does God allow us to go through this? Well, and I think what you're saying is absolutely true. Practically speaking, you know it to be true. Even in your own journey, you know this to be true, Bobby. But it's biblically true.
Absolutely.
It's described in Scripture. It's in 2 Corinthians chapter 1.
That's right.
It starts in verse 3. Blessed be the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, the Father of compassion and the God of all comfort, who comforts us in all of our troubles. Why? So that we can comfort those in any trouble with the comfort we ourselves have received from God.
That's right.
So what happens here basically is you are allowed to experience certain things, not just so you can, of course it's going to develop your character, but so that you can then take the experience you've had and apply it to somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of times we kind of, like you're saying, especially the things that we think are so deeply personal, that we don't want to share those once we feel like we've jumped the hurdle.
And that's exactly what Celebrate Recovery does. It gets you in a room with people to practice 2 Corinthians chapter 1 living.
Yeah.
That give your story away to help each other. And I think that's where it can be healthy. So it can be that sometimes we're at the early stages. See, one of the things, and I'm not saying this is you, Jack, but I am saying it's me. I'm not much, but I'm all I think about, meaning I can be very selfish. And I think addicts in general.
You don't think that's him too? You don't think that's everyone in this room
You know
too?
what, Jim? I'm just nicer than you.
Yeah.
So,
that's true.
So
that's actually true. Yeah. I hate to say
love
that.
it. No,
Everyone's nicer than me.
no.
That's not a problem.
We all love Jim, but you know what? Hey, he'll get in my face so fast. Like as I said in the last episode, I consider Jim one of my mentors. But we all know to know Jim is to be known and to get his thoughts. But
That's
I would
my
say
arrogance. Yeah, but you're right though. This is selfishness, right?
I think that selfishness because for me. I just want to get on with my own life, and I have to remember that the way that I heal is I got to get out of myself, and I got to think about others.
Yeah.
Part of the reason I slip into addiction and get into addictive thinking is because I'm obsessed on my own thinking. I'm obsessed on myself, and I've got to think about myself less if I want to kill selfishness.
Do you think all addictive then thinking is really the rooted in our
Selfishness?
Yeah.
I do think there's a lot there. I want to be careful because I do think that people go through some horrific things like what Jack's gone through, right? Like,
yeah, right.
And it's tough, right? Like, okay, say in his case, you've been abused. Well, it's hard not to think about that. And so so I think that there's like a selfishness that's like really ugly. And then I think that there's just this selfishness that gets us to turn inward. And it's not that people are wanting to think about themselves, they're just stuck. And that's not like the ugly kind of selfishness where the person's just self-obsessed with their life. Yeah. So I think, yes, they're both forms of selfishness, but sometimes life hurts us so bad that we can't stop thinking about our pain. You know how to tell when someone needs counseling. It's when every time you bump into that same individual, all they talk about is their pain. They can't get off their pain. That's a person who is self-absorbed, and they might not be wanting in a sickly, like grotesque, like kind of way to be that selfish. They've just been wounded so deeply, and we need to kind of help them lock them.
That's good.
Yeah.
Jack, does that help?
It does, and to kind of like give.
And
you
I'm
an
sorry
idea
for
of,
Jim,
like,
Jack. I really am. I know that.
That's why Jack didn't call Jim. He called Bobby. So.
Well, the way I look at that with Mr. Jim there is, real people say real things,
Yeah,
That's right.
stupid things. Yeah, 'cause they don't know, have no experience in which to ground those things. Yeah, exactly.
No.
Yeah.
The way that I've always thought about what happened, with me as a kid was, I don't think God allowed it to happen, but I know He held my hand during the whole time, and it helped me become more of a compassionate person and empathetic. Again, help other people, but I do want to do the one-on-one with a counselor, but maybe the group thing later, but just trying to finally accept, like 20 some years later,
I'm so sorry, Jack. Listen, the recovery often begins with acceptance. And I think sometimes it's so hard for us to accept something like that bad happened to us. So like if somebody loses a loved one or if something bad happens to us, we go over and over and over in our head, why did this happen? Why did this happen? And it creates just this unbelievable emotional torture. And I think that what helps me when I just feel stuck in life is acceptance. And I love to say the prayer that has helped me so many times, and I just want to pray it over you. God, grant Jack the serenity to accept the things he cannot change, the courage to change the things he can, and the wisdom to know the difference.
Jack, thank you for calling us today on the Pastor's Perspective program. God bless you, brother.